They say money can't buy love, but in the world of the ultra-rich, it can certainly buy a very convincing lie. Did you know that 70% of lottery winners go bankrupt within a few years? It's a staggering statistic that proves one thing. Wealth without character is just a countdown to a crash. But what happens when the person holding the checkbook is blinded by a heart of gold? This is the story of Seraphina Dubois. She didn't just have money, she had an empire. She was a woman who could buy anything in the world, yet she chose to invest everything into a man who had nothing. Liam Thorne was a starving artist with $1 million smile and a $0 bank account. Seraphina saw a masterpiece in him. She took him from a cramped, drafty basement to the penthouse suites of Paris. She transformed his life, paying every bill, funding every dream, and shielding him from the harsh reality of the world. She thought she was building a future. She didn't realize she was funding her own heartbreak. Fast forward to a rainy Tuesday night at the Pierre Hotel. The gala is in full swing. Seraphina is standing in a $20,000 gown, holding a champagne flute that's shaking in her hand. Across the hall, in a darkened VIP lounge she paid for, she sees him. Liam. He isn't alone. He's whispering the same promises into the ear of a young model that he whispered to Seraphina that morning. The betrayal isn't just romantic. It's financial. He's using Seraphina's credit card to buy the very jewelry he's sliding onto another woman's finger. But to understand the weight of that moment, we have to go back to the beginning. Back to a rainy gallery opening where a billionaire heiress fell for a man who couldn't even afford his own bus fare. Back to the days when they shared cheap pizza on the floor of his studio, and she secretly paid his landlord so he wouldn't be evicted. She loved him with a passion that defied logic. He loved her with a hunger that was purely predatory. You might think you've heard this story before. The rich girl, the poor boy, the classic betrayal. But what you're about to discover will change how you think about success and loyalty forever. Because Seraphina Dubois didn't just get mad. She got even. And her revenge? It wasn't just cold. It was expensive. By the end of this hour, you'll see exactly what happens when a woman with unlimited resources decides to bankrupt the man who broke her heart. You won't believe the final twist that left the art world, and the financial world, in absolute shock. Before we begin this incredible journey into the heart of betrayal and the heights of luxury, welcome to the channel. I want to be honest with you. This video took over many hours to research, good hours to write, and nearly quality hours to produce and edit. Every detail of Seraphina and Liam's world was carefully crafted to bring you the most compelling, cinematic version of this story. If you appreciate that level of dedication and love deep dive stories about power and passion, please hit the subscribe button. It truly means the world to me and helps me continue creating these in-depth narratives for you. Before we dive into Chapter 1, I have to ask, have you ever wondered what separates those who build lasting wealth from those who lose everything? Is it hard work, or is it simply who you choose to trust? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. Now, let's go back to the night it all started. The night the billionaire met the beggar to owe the rest of the world, Seraphina Dubois lived in a dream, but to her, that dream felt more like a vault. The Dubois name was etched into the skyline of Manhattan. Her father, Julian Dubois, had built a $4.2 billion real estate empire from the ground up, and Seraphina was the crown jewel. She didn't just grow up with money, she grew up with the weight of it. We're talking about a childhood spent in a $45 million triplex overlooking Central Park. Summers weren't for camp. They were for the French Riviera on a 200-foot yacht named the Seraphina. By the time she was 22, she had graduated from the London School of Economics and was managing a private equity fund worth $800 million. But here was the problem. In her world, every handshake was a transaction. Every, "I love you," felt like a negotiation. She lived in a circle of sharks in silk suits, people who only saw her as a bridge to her father's bank account. Seraphina was wealthy, yes, but she was starving for something authentic. She often said, "I'd trade every diamond I own for one person who looks at me and doesn't see a dollar sign." Enter Liam Thorne. Liam was the literal definition of struggling artist. When they met, he was living in a crumbling walk-up in Bushwick, Brooklyn. The radiator hissed, the windows rattled, and his bank account was sitting at a dismal negative $142. He was 3 months behind on rent and survived on black coffee and the hope that one of his canvases would finally sell. Their first meeting wasn't at a high society ball. It was at a rainy, low-budget art gallery opening where Seraphina had slipped away to escape a boring charity event. Liam was there, not as a guest, but as a temporary waiter. He spilled a tray of cheap Prosecco right at her feet. Most people in her circle would have had him fired on the spot. But when he looked up, he didn't apologize with fear. He looked at her with a crooked, defiant smile and said, "Well, at least the floor has better taste in wine now." Seraphina was hooked. For the first time in her life, someone wasn't impressed by her. And Liam. He had no idea he was talking to one of the richest women in the country. To him, she was just a beautiful girl in an expensive-looking dress who seemed a little out of place. The romance moved with the speed of a high-speed rail. Within a month, Seraphina was spending her nights in his drafty studio instead of her climate-controlled penthouse. She loved the realness of it. She loved his passion for art, his stories about growing up in a small town in Ohio, and the way he talked about changing the world with a brushstroke. But as the weeks turned into months, Seraphina's savior complex kicked in. She couldn't stand seeing the man she loved struggle. She started small, paying his $1,800 rent through an anonymous arts grant she created just for him. Then she bought out his entire collection of paintings using a shell company, putting $50,000 into his pockets overnight. Liam thought his talent was finally being recognized. He didn't realize his success was actually a gift from his girlfriend. As Liam's bank account grew, so did his ego. The humble, defiant artist began to fade, replaced by someone who enjoyed the luxury a little too much. He started wearing $1,200 boots and dining at restaurants where the appetizers cost more than his old rent. Seraphina didn't mind. In her mind, she was just leveling him up so they could be together properly. She thought, if I remove the stress of survival, his genius will truly shine. She was paying for his lifestyle, his studio, his clothes, and eventually his high-end lifestyle. She was the silent engine behind his entire existence. But there's a danger in giving a man everything he never earned. He starts to believe he deserves it, and he starts to wonder what else he can get away with. The first red flag appeared 6 months in. Seraphina noticed a charge on an emergency credit card she had given Liam. A $4,000 charge at a high-end jewelry boutique. She waited for the surprise, thinking it was an engagement ring or a birthday gift. The gift never arrived. Instead, she saw a photo on a random social media tag. It was Liam at a club, and in the background, a beautiful young woman was wearing a necklace that looked remarkably like the one Seraphina had paid for. Seraphina wanted to believe it was a mistake. She wanted to believe that the man she had saved was incapable of biting the hand that fed him. But in the world of the ultra-rich, mistakes are rare, and betrayals are calculated. This brings us to a tough question. If you were born into Seraphina's circumstances, with billions at your disposal and a deep sense of loneliness, do you think you would have made the same choices? Would you have tried to buy a man's success just to keep him close? Let me know what you think in the comments. Because what Seraphina does next isn't just a confrontation. It's the beginning of a financial massacre. You won't believe how she sets the trap. Trust is a luxury the rich can afford, but betrayal is a debt that always comes due with interest. It was 11:42 p.m. on a Friday. Seraphina was sitting in her home office, the soft glow of 3 monitors illuminating a glass of vintage Bordeaux she hadn't touched. She was looking at the monthly statement for the black Amex she'd given Liam for artistic emergencies. Then the notification chirped. A $12,000 charge. Location: the Baccarat Hotel. Seraphina knew for a fact Liam was supposed to be in his studio in Bushwick, working on a private commission that he claimed would be his breakthrough. He'd even sent her a photo of his paint-stained hands earlier that evening. But the Baccarat wasn't an art supply store. It was one of the most expensive hotels in the city. She didn't call him. She didn't scream. She simply picked up a second phone, the one her father's head of security, Marcus, had given her years ago. "Marcus," she whispered, her voice like ice. "I need eyes on the Baccarat. Suite 402. Now." The wait was agonizing. For 3 hours, Seraphina sat in total silence. She thought about the early days, the way Liam looked at her when he thought she was just a girl from the suburbs. She thought about the $250,000 she'd funneled into his career over the last year. Every cent was an investment in a man she believed was her soulmate. When Marcus sent the first photo, the silence in the room shattered. It wasn't just a picture of Liam. It was a picture of Liam with a woman named Chloe, a 22-year-old aspiring influencer who Seraphina recognized as a regular at the gallery. In the photo, Liam was laughing. He looked lighter, happier, and more arrogant than Seraphina had ever seen him. He was wearing a $5,000 suit Seraphina had bought him for a gala. He was pouring champagne she was paying for. And then the kicker. He handed Chloe a small velvet box. The $4,000 necklace from the boutique. This wasn't just a fling. This was a lifestyle. Seraphina realized in that moment that she wasn't just his girlfriend. She was his benefactor. He was using her wealth to play the role of a billionaire to another woman. The next morning, Liam returned to their shared penthouse, smelling of expensive cigars and lies. He kissed her forehead and told her the painting was coming along beautifully. "I think I'm finally finding my voice, Seraphina," he said, pouring himself a coffee. "People are starting to see me for who I really am." He had no idea how right he was. Instead of throwing his bags out the window, Seraphina did something much more dangerous. She played along. For the next 3 weeks, she became the perfect unsuspecting partner. She even increased his monthly stipend by $10,000, claiming she wanted him to focus entirely on his soul. Liam took the bait. He got bolder. He started taking Chloe to the Hamptons. He rented a yacht using Seraphina's corporate account, telling Chloe it belonged to his family office. Meanwhile, Seraphina was working with a team of forensic accountants. She discovered that Liam hadn't just been spending her money, he'd been skimming it. He had set up a fake framing company, and was billing Seraphina's foundation for tens of thousands of dollars in services that never existed. The betrayal was layering like oil on a canvas. Every time he told her he loved her, Seraphina felt a physical pang of disgust. But she also felt a cold, sharp clarity. She realized that by paying his bills, she had removed the one thing that made him an artist. His struggle. She had turned a hungry lion into a pampered, entitled housecat who thought he was a king. She watched him across the dinner table one night. He was complaining about the limited wine list at a Michelin star restaurant she'd booked. "Is everything okay, Liam?" she asked softly. "It's just, you get used to a certain level of quality, you know?" he replied, not even looking at her. "I just feel like I finally belong in this world." He truly believed his own lie. He believed he was there because of his talent, not her bank account. Seraphina's investigation hit pay dirt when Marcus uncovered a secret lease. Liam had rented a luxury apartment in Soho, not for his art, but for Chloe. He'd signed the lease using a forged signature of Seraphina's CFO. He wasn't just cheating. He was committing fraud. He was trying to build a secondary life using the bricks of her empire. Seraphina had enough evidence to put him away for years. She had the photos, the bank statements, and the forged documents. She could have called the police that afternoon. She could have had him dragged out of the Soho apartment in handcuffs. But Seraphina Dubois didn't want him in a cell. She wanted him back in the gutter. She wanted him to feel the exact moment the ground vanished beneath his feet. She began the phase 2 of her plan, the grand illusion. She told Liam she was organizing a legacy gala for him. It would be his official debut into the elite art world. She promised him that the CEOs of the world's biggest hedge funds and the directors of the Louvre would be there. "This is your moment, Liam," she told him, stroking his cheek. "By the end of this night, the whole world will know exactly who you are." Liam was ecstatic. He spent the next week spending even more of her money, buying a custom tuxedo and a watch that cost $45,000. He invited Chloe to the event, telling her he was going to publicly dump the heiress and run away with her once he had his own money. He thought he was the one holding the cards. He thought he was playing a billionaire. What Liam didn't see was Seraphina in her office late at night, deleting his access to every account. One by one. The studio lease? Cancelled. The credit cards? Scheduled to decline at 9 p.m. on the night of the gala. The Soho apartment? Already back on the market. She was systematically erasing his existence from the world of luxury she had built for him. The most painful part for Seraphina wasn't the money. It was the realization that she had wasted a year of her life on a ghost. A man who didn't exist. She looked at the first painting he'd ever given her. The one from the Leakey studio in Bushwick. It was the only thing of his that had any value, and it was the only thing she didn't destroy. The night of the gala arrived. The Pierre Hotel was draped in gold and white lilies. The air smelled of expensive perfume and anticipation. Liam arrived in a chauffeured Rolls-Royce, looking like the prince he believed he was. Chloe was waiting in a side room, tucked away as his secret guest, wearing a dress that cost as much as a mid-sized sedan. Seraphina met Liam at the top of the grand staircase. She looked breathtaking in a gown of midnight blue, the color of a bruise. "Are you ready, Liam?" she asked, her voice a deadly silk. "I've never been more ready for anything in my life," he said, flashing that $1,000,000 smile. The room went dark. A single spotlight hit the stage. The Legacy Gala was about to begin. But the legacy being displayed wasn't the one Liam had spent weeks preparing. At this moment, everything hung in the balance. Seraphina stood at the crossroads of her own heart. At this point, Seraphina had to choose between two paths. Option A. Quietly hand the evidence to the police and let the law handle him, avoiding a public scandal. Or Option B. Go through with the public humiliation, exposing his lies in front of the very people he spent months trying to impress, but risking her own reputation in the process. What would you have done? Would you take the high road, or would you make sure he felt every bit of the fire he started? This decision would define everything that came next. Because what Seraphina chooses to do on that stage, it wasn't just a breakup. It was an execution. The spotlight didn't just illuminate the art that night. It exposed the thief hiding behind the canvas. As the room went dark at the Pierre Hotel, Liam Thorne stood center stage, his chest puffed out, waiting for the applause he felt he had finally earned. Behind him, a massive high-definition screen flickered to life. But instead of his masterpiece, the first image that appeared was a bank statement. A collective gasp rippled through the audience. A room filled with $200 billion in net worth. The screen showed a clear line-by-line breakdown of the $540,000 Liam had skimmed from the Dubois Foundation. Then came the photos. Liam at the baccarat. Liam on the yacht. Liam sliding a necklace onto Chloe's neck, all time-stamped, all undeniable. Seraphina didn't say a word. She simply walked off the stage, leaving him standing there in a tuxedo she paid for, under a spotlight she owned, in front of a world that was already erasing him. The struggle for Liam Thorne didn't begin in that room. It began the second he walked out of it. Within 10 minutes, his black Amex was declined at the hotel bar when he tried to order a stiff drink. By the time he reached the valet, his chauffeured Rolls-Royce had already been dispatched back to the garage by Seraphina's team. He was left standing on the sidewalk in the rain, clutching a velvet gift box for a mistress who had vanished the moment she saw the bank statements on the screen. Chloe wasn't a romantic. She was a predator, and she knew a sinking ship when she saw one. But the true darkest period was just beginning. Seraphina didn't just stop paying his bills. She filed a civil suit for $1.2 million in damages and embezzlement. Liam's bank account, the one he'd been carefully skimming into, was frozen by a court order. He went from a Soho penthouse to a $40 a night hostel in Queens in less than 48 hours. The transition was brutal. He found himself staring at the same stained ceilings he thought he'd escaped forever. Only this time, he didn't have his talent to fall back on. He was blacklisted. No gallery would touch him. No collector would look at his work. In the art world, he wasn't a starving artist anymore. He was a financial liability. For the next 6 months, Liam's life was a masterclass in desperation. He sold his $5,000 suits for $200 at consignment shops just to buy groceries. He tried to call his old friends in Bushwick, the ones he'd looked down on once he got a taste of the Dubois fortune. They didn't pick up. He was forced to take a job painting fences for a local contractor, A cruel irony for a man who thought he'd be the next Picasso. Every stroke of the brush was a reminder of what he'd thrown away. He was living on less than $400 a week, with $1 million debt hanging over his head like a guillotine. Meanwhile, Seraphina was fighting her own battle. Her struggle wasn't financial, but emotional. She had to face the board of directors at Dubois Enterprises and explain why she'd allowed a nobody to skim $500,000 under her watch. The public humiliation was a weight she carried every day. She saw the whispers in the elevators. She read the headlines, "The Billionaire and the Beggar," how an heiress was played. It would have been easy to hide, to go to the French Riviera and wait for the news cycle to end. Instead, she chose resilience. She poured herself into the foundation, restructuring it with such legal precision that it became the gold standard for philanthropic security. She turned her heartbreak into a weapon, becoming sharper, colder, and more calculated. This brings us to a pivotal moment in our story. Do you think Seraphina should have kept the betrayal private to protect her family's reputation? Or was this public execution the only way to truly reclaim her power? Share your perspective in the comments. I'm curious to see where you draw the line between justice and revenge. As Seraphina rose, Liam continued to sink. He reached his breaking point when he saw a billboard in Times Square featuring Seraphina. She was being honored as Philanthropist of the Year. He, on the other hand, had just received an eviction notice from his hostel. He decided to do something desperate. He decided to go back to the Dubois penthouse, convinced that if he could just get 5 minutes with her, if he could just show her how much he was suffering, she would soften. He still believed he could paint his way back into her heart. He waited outside the Dubois building for 14 hours in the blistering cold. When her motorcade finally arrived, he lunged forward, screaming her name. Security tackled him before he got within 10 feet. Seraphina didn't even look out the window. She didn't even know it was him. To her, he wasn't a threat or a lover anymore. He was just noise. This was the moment Liam realized the most terrifying truth about the ultra-rich. Their greatest weapon isn't their money. It's their ability to make you invisible. Liam's resilience took a dark turn. He began to obsess over the ending of his own story. He started a series of paintings in his tiny, shared room, dark, twisted images of Seraphina and the world of wealth. He thought this raw art would be his redemption. He thought the world would love his villain era. But when he finally managed to show the work to a small-time dealer, the man just shook his head. "Liam," the dealer said, "this isn't art. It's a police report. You aren't painting a masterpiece. You're painting a confession." While Liam was trapped in his cycle of self-pity, Seraphina's forensic team found the final piece of the puzzle. It was something Liam had forgotten about, a digital trail from his secret Soho apartment that linked him to a much larger scheme involving an art forgery ring. He wasn't just a cheater. He wasn't just a skimmer. He was the fall guy for a multi-million-dollar criminal operation, and Seraphina was about to hand him over to the FBI. The walls were closing in. Liam was broke, alone, and about to be famous for all the wrong reasons. But the twist, the one that will truly shock you, isn't about his arrest. It's about what Seraphina discovered in that Soho apartment after Liam was gone. We're at the midpoint of this incredible journey, and the stakes have never been higher. If you're still here with me, I genuinely appreciate your time. What's kept you engaged so far? Is it the hope for Seraphina's total victory? Or are you waiting to see if Liam has one last card to play? Let me know in the comments below. Get ready, because in the next chapter, we're going to look at the final confrontation. And trust me, you are not prepared for what was hidden in the basement of that studio. The most dangerous person in the room isn't the one with the loudest voice. It's the one who has already calculated your exit. For Seraphina Dubois, the transformation didn't happen in a boardroom. It happened in the quiet, dusty basement of that Soho apartment Liam had used to hide his double life. While Liam was busy painting his confessions in a Queen's hostel, Seraphina was personally overseeing the clearance of the property. She found a floorboard that didn't quite sit flush. Beneath it wasn't just jewelry or cash. It was a digital ledger, a hardware wallet, and a set of handwritten codes. Liam Thorne, the starving artist, had been much more than a cheater. He was the middleman for an international art forgery ring that had been laundering money through high-end auctions for years. Suddenly, the narrative shifted. Seraphina realized Liam hadn't just stumbled into her life. He had been curated for her. He was a social engineer, and she had been his ultimate mark. This realization didn't break her. It forged her. Seraphina stopped mourning the man she thought he was. She realized she had been playing checkers while a criminal syndicate was playing chess. But they had made one fatal mistake. They underestimated her intellect because of her bank account. She contacted her father's most ruthless ally, Arthur Sterling, a retired intelligence operative turned corporate fixer. "Arthur," she said, her voice dropping an octave. "I don't want to just stop them. I want to own them." While Seraphina was building her counterstrike, Liam was hitting a different kind of turning point. In the depths of his poverty, something strange happened. He actually started to paint. Not for a lifestyle, not for a scam, but out of a desperate clawing need to process his own failure. He produced a series called The Gilded Lie. It was raw. It was haunting. For the first time in his life, his work had soul. He began to feel a twisted sense of pride. He thought this was his redemption arc. He thought he was becoming the man Seraphina had originally dreamed he was. He managed to get his new work into a small underground show under a pseudonym. The buzz was instantaneous. People were calling him the shadow prophet of the New York art scene. He started to make a little money, real earned money. $2,000 here, $5,000 there. He felt a surge of hope. He began to plan his re-entry into Seraphina's world. He imagined showing up at her office, not as a beggar, but as an equal. A self-made success. He didn't know that every anonymous buyer of his new work was actually a subsidiary of Dubois Global. Seraphina was literally buying his redemption just to control the timing of his final fall. Seraphina's transformation was now complete. She had moved past the scorned woman phase and into a state of absolute surgical power. She had used her resources to systematically infiltrate the forgery ring Liam was connected to. She wasn't just paying his bills anymore. She was paying for the very air he breathed in the art world. She felt a cold, distant satisfaction. She had learned that in the world of the 1%, love is a vulnerability but leverage is a superpower. Liam, unaware he was walking into a trap, sent Seraphina a letter. Not an email, but a handwritten note delivered to her estate. "Seraphina, I am not the man you knew. I have found myself in the dark. I want to show you what I've built without your money. One last gallery showing. Just for you." He had no idea that the independent gallery that offered him a solo show was a front. He didn't know that the federal agents were already being briefed in the room next to Seraphina's office. The preparation for the climax was meticulous. Seraphina ensured that every major player from the night of the Pierre Hotel Gala was invited to this new secret showing. She wanted the same witnesses who saw his shame to see his success. Right before the final curtain dropped, she stood in front of her mirror on the night of the show, wearing a simple, sharp black suit. No jewelry. No flash. Just the quiet confidence of a woman who had already won. She thought about her father's words, "A Dubois never loses. We just wait for the price to drop." She finally understood what that meant. She had waited until Liam's value was at its peak, until he felt he was a success again, so that the loss would hurt more than the first time. She wasn't just breaking his heart this time. She was breaking his spirit. The gallery was a minimalist space in Tribeca. Liam stood at the entrance, his heart racing. He looked healthy. He looked like an artist. He saw Seraphina's motorcade pull up. And for a second, he felt a genuine flicker of love. He thought, "I've done it. I've become the man she wanted." He walked toward her as she entered the room. The crowd went silent. "Seraphina," he whispered, reaching for her hand. "Thank you for coming." She looked at him, and for the first time, he saw something in her eyes that terrified him. It wasn't anger. It was pity. "I didn't come to see the art, Liam," she said, her voice carrying across the silent room. "I came to see the evidence." The room felt like it was losing oxygen. Liam's smile faltered. He looked around and realized that the collectors in the room weren't looking at the paintings. They were looking at him with the cold, detached eyes of hunters. At this point, Seraphina has transformed into someone completely different. A woman who uses her wealth not to support, but to entrap. Do you think people can truly change, or does our core nature stay the same? Has Liam really become a better man through his struggle, or is he still just a scammer looking for his next big break? And has Seraphina become the very shark in a silk suit she used to despise? This is important for what comes next. Because the final secret, the one hidden inside the paintings themselves, is about to be revealed. Get ready for the final chapter. The ending isn't just a shock. It's a total demolition of everything you think you know about this story. The most expensive thing Liam Thorne ever owned was a lie. And tonight, the bill finally came due. The Tribeca gallery was deathly quiet. Liam stood frozen, his hand still half extended toward Seraphina. He looked around the room, seeing the collectors he'd spent all night trying to impress. But their faces had shifted. The warm smiles were gone, replaced by the blank, professional stares of federal agents. Seraphina stood her ground, a pillar of midnight silk. She didn't look like a woman who had been cheated on. She looked like a woman who had just finished a very successful business transaction. "Liam, did you really think I'd buy your redemption?" she asked, her voice echoing off the white walls. "I didn't fund this gallery because I believed in your art. I funded it because I needed you to put all your forgeries in one room." Liam's face went pale. The shadow prophet was crumbling. "Seraphina, I changed. These paintings, they're real. I did this for you. For me." Seraphina stepped closer, her eyes scanning the canvas nearest to him. "You did this for yourself. You used my money to hide your crimes, and then you used my pity to try and crawl back into a life you never earned." She signaled to Marcus, who walked forward with a tablet. On the screen was the digital ledger Seraphina had found under the floorboards of the Soho apartment. "You see, Liam, when you were busy finding your soul in Queens, my team was decrypting your hardware wallet. We found the transactions, the buyers, the overseas accounts, and most importantly, we found the signature you used to forge the Dubois estate documents." The room shifted. Two men in suits moved to the exits. Liam's eyes darted back and forth like a trapped animal. He looked at the audience, the elite of New York, and saw only judgment. The very people he wanted to be his peers were now the witnesses to his final disgrace. "But here's the twist, Liam," Seraphina said, a small, sad smile touching her lips. "I actually liked these new paintings. For a moment, I thought you had finally become an artist. But then I looked at the frames." She tapped the edge of the nearest frame. "The wood you used. It's from the same batch used in the forgeries 3 years ago. You didn't change, Liam. You just got more desperate. You used the same criminal suppliers because you were too broke to buy real materials." The realization hit Liam like a physical blow. His breakthrough was built on the scraps of his crimes. He fell back against the wall, his knees buckling. The vanity, the ego, the $45,000 watch, it all felt like lead weight on his skin. The federal agents moved in. There was no shouting, no dramatic chase. Just the metallic click of handcuffs that sounded like a final period at the end of a very long sentence. As Liam was led away, he looked back at Seraphina. He expected to see triumph. He expected her to gloat. But she was already turning away. She was talking to Marcus about a charity auction for the building. She didn't even watch him leave. To Liam, this was the end of the world. To Seraphina, it was just another Tuesday. She had reclaimed the $1.2 million. She had dismantled a forgery ring. And she had reminded the world that while the Dubois family might be generous, they are never ever blind. Seraphina walked out of the gallery and into the crisp night air. For months, she had dreamt of this moment. She thought she needed to see him in chains to feel whole again. But as her car pulled away from the curb, she realized she didn't feel vengeful. She felt light. The weight of the bills she'd paid for him, the weight of the lies she'd carried, it was all gone. Justice hadn't come from the handcuffs. It had come from the fact that she no longer cared what happened to him. She had moved from being a victim to a victor, not by destroying him, but by outgrowing him. The next morning, the headlines weren't about the scorned heiress. They were about the billionaire who busted an international forgery ring. Seraphina didn't just save her reputation. She elevated it. She was no longer just the girl with the checkbook. She was the woman with the vision. As for Liam, he was back in a cell, staring at a blank wall. No paints. No champagne. No Seraphina. He finally had all the struggle he ever wanted. The confrontation is over. The trap has snapped shut, and Seraphina has walked away with her head held high. Do you feel satisfied with how this played out? Or would you have wanted Seraphina to do something different? Perhaps show mercy, or go even further. There's no wrong answer here. I want to hear your thoughts on where justice ends and revenge begins. But we aren't quite finished. There is one final piece of the story, a letter Seraphina found in her father's desk after the trial. That changes everything we thought we knew about how Liam Thorne first entered her life. The dust is finally settled, but for Liam Thorne, the silence is far louder than the applause he once craved. The legal fallout for Liam was swift and merciless. Because Seraphina had meticulously documented every cent of the $540,000 embezzlement and tied him directly to the international forgery ring, the district attorney had an open and shut case. Liam was sentenced to 8 years in a federal penitentiary. His name, once whispered in the elite circles of the New York art world as a rising star, became a cautionary tale taught in business ethics and art law. Every single painting he ever touched was stripped of its value. They weren't art anymore. They were exhibits A through Z. Today, Liam's reality is a 6 by 9 foot cell. There are no silk sheets, no baccarat suites, and no $45,000 watches. He spends his days in the prison laundry, earning 12 cents an hour. The irony is staggering. He spent a year pretending to be a billionaire on Seraphina's dime, and now he will spend nearly a decade working for pennies to pay back a debt he can never truly settle. He reached for the sun and ended up in the shadows, realizing too late that the broke artist he used to be was actually freer than the rich man he tried to fake. But while Liam fell into obscurity, Seraphina Dubois underwent a second, even more powerful evolution. She didn't just return to her life of luxury. She redefined it. She took over the CEO position at Dubois Global, a move many thought was too early after such a public scandal. But she used the scandal as her launchpad. She launched the Dubois Transparency Initiative, a tech-driven platform that uses blockchain to verify the provenance of fine art. In its first year, the company secured contracts with the Louvre and the Met, adding an estimated $200 million to her personal net worth. She is no longer just the heiress. She is the Iron Lady of fine art. When she walks into a room now, people don't look for her father. They look for her. She recently stood on the cover of Forbes, not for her inheritance, but for her innovation. The headline read, "The billionaire who built a shield from her own heartbreak." She proved that the best way to handle a predator is to become the one thing they can't hunt, a woman who knows her own value. In quiet moments, Seraphina reflects on the journey. She no longer looks back with anger. In a strange, twisted way, she feels a sense of gratitude toward Liam. Liam was a mirror, she told a close friend during a recent trip to her villa in Tuscany. He showed me that I was trying to buy affection because I didn't think I was enough on my own. He didn't just break my heart. He broke my dependency on other people's approval. She realized that Liam's cruelty was actually a gift, a brutal, expensive, and painful gift that forced her to stop being a spectator in her own life and start being the architect of it. Even the children of her empire, the young interns and associates she now mentors, view her story with a sense of awe. They don't see a victim. They see a strategist. She teaches them that wealth is a tool, but character is the foundation. She often tells them, don't worry about who is looking at you. Worry about what you see when you look at yourself. It's a wisdom she paid for in blood, sweat, and millions of dollars. Where are they now? Seraphina lives in a home she bought with her own earned revenue, a stunning architectural marvel in the Hudson Valley. She is surrounded by art that is 100% authentic, much of it from artists who are actually struggling, whom she supports through a strictly monitored and transparent foundation. She has found peace, not in another man, but in her own capability. Liam Thorne has 4 years left on his sentence. He is occasionally visited by his public defender. But Chloe? She was never seen again. She vanished into the ether of the internet, likely looking for her next mark. Liam is alone with his thoughts, and in the world of a narcissist, that is the most brutal punishment of all. The circle is complete. The woman who paid the bills now owns the bank. The man who cheated the system is now a ward of the state. Seraphina's life is no longer a gilded cage. It's a kingdom. And as she looks out over the Hudson River at sunset, she knows that no matter how much money someone tries to take from her, they can never take the person she became while she was winning it back. Looking at where everyone ended up, the heights of Seraphina's success and the depths of Liam's isolation. Do you believe in karma? Is there a universal force that balances the scales, or is this simply the natural, mathematical consequence of the choices they made? I want to hear your perspective. Does everyone eventually get what they deserve, or did Seraphina just play the game better? Drop your thoughts below. We've reached the end of the aftermath, but as I promised, there is one final piece to this puzzle. I told you about a letter Seraphina found in her father's desk. A letter that suggests Liam Thorne's arrival in her life wasn't an accident at all. Are you ready for the final twist? In the end, Seraphina Dubois didn't just win a legal battle. She won back the territory of her own soul. Remember that letter I mentioned? The one Seraphina found in her father's desk? It was a report from a private security firm, dated 3 months before she ever met Liam Thorne. It revealed that her father, Julian, knew exactly who Liam was. He knew about the petty scams and the art world ties. He hadn't stopped the meeting because he wanted his daughter to see a predator up close. He wanted her to learn the one lesson a billionaire's daughter can never learn in a classroom. How to distinguish between someone who loves your presence and someone who loves your possessions. Seraphina realized that Liam wasn't just a villain. He was her final exam. And by reclaiming her power, she had passed with flying colors. The real meaning of wealth, as Seraphina now defines it, isn't about the digits in a bank account. It's about the resilience of your character when those digits are threatened. She often reflects on those months she spent bankrolling a lie. She doesn't see it as lost money anymore. She sees it as the tuition for the most important degree she ever earned. It taught her that you can't build a person who is determined to remain a shadow. You can only build yourself. This journey changed her philosophy on life. She used to think success was a destination where you're finally safe from being used. Now, she knows that success is the peace you feel when you realize that even if someone tries to use you, they can only take what you have, never who you are. She advises the young entrepreneurs she mentors to invest in people's character, not their potential. Because potential without integrity is just a high-interest loan that you'll eventually have to pay back in heartbreak. For the next generation, the children who will eventually inherit the Dubois legacy, this story is their blueprint. Seraphina has ensured they understand that struggle isn't something to be feared or bought away. It's the fire that tempers the steel. She has broken the generational pattern of the lonely heiress. She is teaching them that true love doesn't need a benefactor, and true power doesn't need an audience. They are growing up with a mother who is a lioness, not a victim. As for Liam Thorne, Seraphina has achieved the ultimate form of forgiveness. Indifference. She doesn't wake up wishing him ill. She doesn't track his release date. She understands that his choices were his destiny. He chose the shortcut and it led to a dead end. He chose the lie and it became his prison. There is no triumph in his downfall. Only the quiet, mathematical certainty of a life misspent. So, what can we take away from this 3-hour journey into the world of Seraphina and Liam? First, never let your generosity exceed your discernment. It's a beautiful thing to help someone grow, but make sure you aren't just watering a plastic plant. Second, understand that temporary setbacks are often just setups for a version of yourself you haven't met yet. Seraphina had to lose $1 million to find a version of herself that was worth $1 billion. Most importantly, remember that your worth is not a currency. It doesn't fluctuate with the market, and it doesn't decrease because someone failed to see it. The power of loving yourself through a transformation is the only wealth that can never be stolen, skimmed, or forged. Seraphina Dubois started this story paying the bills for a man who didn't deserve her. She ended it owning the entire world she once thought she needed to buy her way into. The ending didn't shock us because of a plot twist. It shocked us because we watched a soul wake up. This has been a journey of power, passion, and the ultimate price of betrayal. Thank you for staying with me until the very end of this incredible story. It has been an honor to narrate this for you. If this story touched you, or if it changed the way you think about trust and wealth, please leave a love emoji in the comments so I know you made it all the way through. Until next time, remember, the best revenge isn't a life well lived, it's a life lived authentically. I am the Story Keeper and remain blessed.